All right, so tonight I want to give everyone a brief overview of the strategies that you're focusing on for lesson plan 1. So, if I'm designing my lesson plan 1 around, let's say, the mentor text, A Tragedy of Apollo 1, and the lessons that brought us to the moon, and this is one of the texts that I'm using for that. Let me show you how I would model these several strategies using this text. For example, if you're wondering about the anticipatory guide, here's how I would do this. I would develop my hook for my anticipatory set, and it would be specifically for an article. So if here are our text, and so if I have this as my text, then I design my anticipatory guide around that text. So before, in my hook, I might show a video of Apollo 11 and just go ahead and start having a discussion, an open-ended discussion, stating to the students, tell me what you see, what do you think, what do you hear, and just start having that general discussion. Lead them nowhere. Let them discuss. And then I would hand them, as far as my anticipatory guide, I would hand them this guide. And I say, okay, boys and girls, let's, even 6th graders, I'm like, okay, somebody read me the directions, and they'll read me the directions. And so before we actually start reading, this is how I'm getting into my introduction. And so this is kind of a little different. I tell them directions, and they're going to actually do independent work first. It's going to be a little flip-flop. So I've hooked. I've kind of read the directions for them. We've read the directions together in the hook. And then I've actually made this independent. And independently, before they read, they're supposed to either agree or disagree. So that can be independent work. Or you can put this in your hook, but I love to show the Apollo pictures, okay? And then after they've done the agree or disagree, then I begin to model my read aloud. And, we go just through the Buell. The Buell gives us suggestions as to how to go through the instruction. And I change it up for my students a little bit to fit their needs. And so I say, okay, now that we've done the before reading, we kind of have an understanding of what do we think. Now let's actually find out what the text says. And so I model reading, and I say, when you see a statement that was in our anticipatory guide, stop me. And so I'll read, and I already have marked in my text where I should stop for my anticipatory guide. And I usually outline my statements. That's why I like to make my own items. I don't like to get the prepackaged and all that stuff, because I can outline my statements to follow the text. So this statement is the very first statement. The student should, call out, ooh, that's, I have a little call and response. So when they get a statement, they go, there it is. And so they tell me, there's the statement. And then we stop, and I say, okay, I'm doing my think aloud. I'm showing and modeling for the students, how do I go about this? Well, now, here's where this statement is, and let's go back and read closely as to what the text said, so I can bring in a little bit of close reading for them and show them how I use those annotation marks to figure out what the text is actually saying. And so I read this statement, I'm like, compare it back to the text, and then I have to say, okay, but the text says this, and that's where I start putting my text evidence here in this column. And so here's the text evidence, and here's the statement. Well, they don't really match up, so I disagree, or they match up and I agree. And so that's all modeling, very, very quick. Then I do guided. And when guided, I'll get a student to start reading the text, whether we're reading aloud. I like for them to come up and follow along on the smartboard. And so they'll point on the smartboard and we're reading aloud. And they know, my students know, when you're ready, when you hear that statement, you say, there it is. And so when that student gets to this part of the text where it talks about this, they go, there it is. And I say, okay, boys and girls, let's discuss. You tell me what we need to do next. And I'll start pulling names. So I'll start calling names on popsicle sticks. So I'd get your teacher, your mentor teacher, say, hey, do you have some names that I could write on popsicle sticks or that I can pull so I can call on students to interact with me? So that's the very first thing I would make sure I get, because you don't want to sit there. I get so bored in videos watching teacher candidates teach these great lessons, and the students are not engaged. The whole time the students need to be engaged. So I guide them through this, and then we do another one. And so I guide them through another one, reading the text, and they go, there it is. Another student's reading the text, there it is. And then we discuss it. And now what I'll do is I'll make the next two partners. And so, all right, you're going to do the next two on your own. You're going to read together and you're going to discuss, agree or disagree, making sure to give me your text evidence. And as they're doing that, you're going to have in your lesson plans, as the students are partner working to complete the next two, that's the collaborate stage, then I'm going to go around and I'm going to be listening to the conversations, and I'm going to see those who are getting stuck. I can stop right there and I can really guide them just a little bit more. Are those students who are my English language learners? Then I can actually help them do a little bit of the reading. I might partner them with a strong language student who is fluent in English and can read. That could be one of my accommodations for that ELL student. For my students who are struggling readers, well then, if they're struggling readers, I can accommodate this right here, where I'm either partnering them with a higher reader, or I have my lower group of readers with me and we're doing this together. So as the other students are working in collaborated groups and partner groups, I'm working with my very low level students, my tier students, on these two. Then after we do that, we move. Now I want you to work on the next two by yourself. And so for the next two by themselves, I still have the same accommodations for ELA, struggling readers, and now my enrichment students, because they're now working on their own. My two statements here might say, like right here on their paper, I may have a little sidebar where I've written, but I like to write it in here. I'll say on here, afterwards, make the statement true. Oh, goodness. If it is a disagree. And that's why I like to have the other little tab, but I only have it on my students who are higher level learners, because that's an enrichment. Or for my enrichment students, instead of them giving just two, I might give them 4. And so I'm really bringing in the enrichment, but it's a lot more for their statements, for them to turn in their statements into true statements. And then here, when we talk about notes and reading response, and which your Buell text talks about this, it actually, goes into, that can be part of your independent work there, their notes where they put their reading, part of their close reading. And so I just want you to think about this strategy, and that's how I do an anticipatory set. Now for my assessment, what am I assessing? Well, I'm assessing these 4. These I guided. This one I modeled. So we did that one together. And I still read it to see if they actually were going along with me. And I kind of know if they're going along with me or not because I'm watching for engagement. And then I still read these answers here because they're going along with me. So I'm still assessing this. But then I'm really assessing these. This shows me, okay, if they can do these but they can't do these, then they really didn't understand how to find text evidence. And this would be great for Standard 1. I would use Anticipatory Guide for Standard 1. It's a really good standard for citing that textual evidence. Or if they can do these and do these, then you know that they're well on the way to be proficient. This is your assessment. This is your assessment. Okay? You don't have to make any other test or quiz or anything. This is your assessment for that lesson, for lesson 1. All right, so that's the anticipatory guide. Let's move on to, I have my same text. Let's move on to the KWL, which is very basic. I love a KWL, but let me show you how I can actually formulate it into the gradual release, okay? It's a little different as far as the gradual release. I can first start my hook off with another Apollo topic. I can start my hook off with the same picture of the Apollo 11, bringing in that discussion. 5-minute discussion, tops. And then I can say, you know what? I really want to know a whole lot about this. And then I introduce the text. And when we look at the text, which looks a whole lot better in pictures, but we look at the title, and then if it has any text features, we start looking at the text features. And then I say to myself, here's my modeling. I actually know a lot. I know a few things about this. Well, I know Apollo 11 is science. And so I modeled the know. And then I start modeling the want to know. But I really want to know what astronauts were in the Apollo 11. Or what caused the Apollo 11 to have its tragedy. And so I would model a statement of what I know, and then I'd model a question. Then you would get all the students, I love this, get all the students to, here's how you can guide it. Can somebody give me a no and give me a want to know? Or you can turn it around. You modeled here. So here's how you can flip it. You've modeled here. Then you can actually go and flip-flop your gradual release. You can get everybody to make a K and a W independently. So you've got model instruction, and then you've got independent instruction. And then you can go back to guided. You can go to guided, and you can say, okay, now boys and girls, let's look at these no's. And you read through the no's. And you say, okay, you can start asking, what do you think about this no? All right, and then same for the W. Or you can get, instead of doing independent, you can get partners to write down. I like for independent for my 6th graders. But for a lower grade, I would get partners, and even a lower grade that collaborate, even a lower grade, I would guide. So I modeled these two, and then I guide several, 2 or 3 of these, and then I let them maybe do, I let the boys do the no and the girls do the want to know, or alternate. I like the odd, because we number our students, so I like to odds do the no and the evens do the want to know. Well, then we get into, and that shouldn't take very long. You just got to decide how you want to model. How do you want to formulate that with your students? Remember, student engagement is very, very important. Think about that classroom management. How are you going to engage your students, so on and so forth. And then here, what I want to learn. So you're going to actually start reading through the article or the text, your text, and you are going to begin actually learning. And so when you start to come to a spot where you've learned the answer to these want to knows, so that's where you're going to have to model. And so I kind of model my question is what I want to know. What I want to know is going to be up closer to the text because I read aloud first. And so it should be able to be what I learn. That way they can see I learn quickly modeled when I start reading aloud. And I show the students, I model for the students how to close read to understand, ooh, that's the answer to my question. And so if that's the answer to my question, then I can come over here and write it down beside my question. And then you get the students to go through the gradual release. So if you do collaborate, if you did 2 questions and 2 no's together, then you can, if you did that guided, then you can guide the next 2. Or if you did these individual first, well, then you can guide the students on how to answer the next 2 questions. Whatever 2 questions pop up in the text of the order that you read. And then you can start having them do individual. So this is, the collaborate. Or you can make all of this guided and modeled. Then you can go to your concept map, because here's where you can do collaborate and individual. Create a concept map of what was learned using the graphic organizer. Use the lines to list the details about each category. And so I like to use this as individual assessment. So we do in the classroom, we actually are able to do questions independently depending on your grade level and your students. Just be mindful of that. But here, still model, guide, independent when I first do the KWL. When you get started doing the KWLs, you don't need a model, guide. You can just move straight on to this can be a collaborative and this can be independent, but you're not there yet. And so you could easily design your lessons where you have this is guided, model, guide, and collaborative, and then here this is independent. And so the students would have to write Apollo 11, and you can go ahead and start one for yours. You can say Apollo 11 and then start building your categories. And so you would do maybe Apollo 11 and then do a category name and one example. So category name and then one example. Just some thoughts going through that Buell text will help you. But this could easily be my assessment. Now, how would I differentiate this? No problem. If this was my higher level group, I would actually have them, after they finish this portion, they could create a poster describing the Apollo 11 event. And it has to be a description in so many words and so many graphics. So they'd have to draw, and they can only use so many amount of words. If it's my ELL students for this, I could easily already provide them a list of words that they need to have in front of them. So maybe the list of words that go in all of these places, I could already have a list, and they can decide what needs to go over here in this area. If it's my struggling learners, my lower level readers, I would actually guide them through one branch in a separate group for that independent practice, and then I would go through the pieces. So that's just another way of how you can differentiate that instruction. And what is my assessment? This piece right here. So that's the KWL. When we talk about the double entry, let me fix this. And so the double entry diary, I like a double entry diary or journal. And here are the directions here of a double entry. It says on the left-hand side of your table, you must complete at least 8 quotes from reading with the pages noted. And should you wish to refer to a particular larger section, you may paraphrase it. So they can't quote a very large section. My rule is if it's longer than a sentence, they have to paraphrase it. And then here, the right side of your table, you must comment. Now, this is so easy to model. I get the students hooked by looking at a visual of the Apollo 11, and then I actually model reading through the text, a portion of it, and I start actually filling in my left-hand side. And then I also begin filling in my right-hand side, okay? And I will then guide the students. We'll continue reading, we'll do the left-hand side, then we'll do the right-hand side, so on and so forth. And then the students can do collaborative. Now, I like collaborative, so let me tell you how I do collaborative. And the Buell text gives you several options. So if they're in partner pair, I'll get one partner to do their left-hand side on their paper. And so both partner pairs are doing the left-hand sides of their paper. And then I'll get to switch papers. And so when they switch papers, each partner has a different paper and they're doing the right-hand side. So just an option. Your grade level may not be able to handle that. Just refer to the Buell text. But my independent work is reading the rest of the text and then actually creating more pulling more quotations and more, and then making more comments. Okay? Actually, this right here is the independent work of a 6th grader. So I've already modeled, guided, and we've collaborated on several other quotes and reading sections of reading before they even begin these 8. And then here's what it looks like. Where they make that commentary or their analysis. So just another way that you could do that. So just a thought. And then the last one we have, and then I didn't talk about how we could differentiate. You kind of get the drift on how to differentiate for most of those. If you were doing the comment side for the ELL students, again, I would provide them that's my puppy, sorry. My mother's coming over, sorry. Anyway, I would provide on the left-hand side, I would provide a list of words for my students, for my ELL students. For my struggling learners, when they begin to do their independent, then they would work with me. When they're doing collaborative, I might pair them with a stronger student. Same with my ELL. I might pair them with a stronger student. And then for my enrichment students, how I enrich the analysis is I would actually have them develop an oral set of questions to ask an Apollo astronaut if they could. And so just an idea, it's just enrichment for them to push them forward a little bit because they're going to finish early. Then you have your magnet summary, and for your magnet summaries, they're really interesting. I love doing the magnet summaries. So this kind of goes through what is a magnet summary, and you're focusing on concepts. So don't just pull out words, pull out concepts. And this goes step by step, and so just like you would do any other, here are the different ones. Hidden Figures, I would model how to do the human computers. Then I would guide with executive order. I would guide with hidden figures. Then my students are actually going to read a supplemental text, and I'll already have some concepts pulled out. And so they're going to do a few concepts collaboratively. So I like to do 2 and 2. So they'll do 2 card concepts collaboratively on another text. And then they'll do 2 card concepts independently. And so that's the magnet summary. Again, for my ELA student, my ELL, I don't know why I'm stuck in ELA world. For my ELL students, when we talk about, again, I'd give them that list of vocabulary words that are very important to those Tier 2 and Tier 3 words that they need in front of them. I would, for a text, another way you can do for your ELL students as far as a differentiation, if you have a text that they're having to read independently, like I would for this particular skill and strategy, is that I would have a text, because they're going to read a supplemental text. I would have that text already recorded for them, pre-recorded for them onto something where they can do that in a listening center. They can listen to the text as they're reading it. You can do that for any of your lessons. That's a good differentiation for your ELL students. And then for my struggling readers, for my struggling group, collaboratively, of course, I would pair them with a higher learner. But when they go to do that independent, I would just kind of use guiding questions to guide them through. So I wouldn't just let them go off independently. They would actually have guiding questions. But I'm not going to tell them what to do next. Like, I'm going to question them where to go. And I may actually have them reading aloud their individual pieces of text, since they're reading a piece of text individually, if I use a supplemental text in this lesson. So that's just a quick, I say quick, I'm sorry if it was monotone. That's just a brief of how to do and what to do. I try to provide you visuals here. I do hope it helped for you and gave you some information. I will put all of these items in this module now that I've gone over it. That way you have it and you can use it. It'll be there for a PDF. Please don't copy everything to put in yours, but it's here to use, okay? Of course, you're going to have to change some information based on your grade level. The one thing that I want to tell you, if you're going to do of course you're going to do one of these strategies. But if I'm using magnet summary here, and I told you that I'm going to model this one and guide this one and guide this one. But before I ever teach that lesson, I'm going to go ahead and have this one ready so I know what it should look like. I'll go ahead and have this one ready so I know what it'll look like. And I'll have this one ready so I know what it should look like based on the text. So every time you have a skill that you're teaching through a strategy, like I would go ahead and sit down and write out my KWL. And I would sit down and write my double entry diary. I need to see what it looks like as a teacher. I'd go ahead and build my anticipatory guide, my anticipation guide, and go ahead and do the before reading and the after reading and my text evidence. And the reason you want to do that is because you want to make sure you work out as many flaws as you can before you teach the lessons. You do not want to get in the classroom and that be the first time you do that actual strategy and have no clue how to do it. You don't want to get in the classroom and that be the first time you read the text and you're like, oh no, I was not prepared. You want to be as prepared as possible. And that's part of your requirements, is to have a teacher-created sample strategy. And so that's what I'm going to be looking for in the lessons that you're uploading for your assignment. I do hope that this was a helpful session. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.